Welcome to civics.com. Focus on identity, and very, very pleased to have with me today Mark Dixon of Sun Microsystems, who wrote an interesting blog post on core identity, which set off a sequence of events which happily has brought us together today to get a little bit more into this topic, this concept of core identity. So, Mark, thank you so much for coming by the studio here in Glen Park, San Francisco. It's good to have you.
Well, thank you, Des. I appreciate being able to be here with you today and discuss, which is a very interesting topic to me. That about identity and what that means and how that applies to ordinary lives. And back in 1995, I got this concept of creating an identity map that showed almost graphically the relationships between concepts of identities, of individuals, of people. And at the center of that was this concept of core identity that we can discuss, and then other things like what are the attributes that represent our individual identities as human beings, our names and our different attributes and relationships and what we know and where we are and so on.
Yeah. And that's what caught my eye too. As I was doing a search on the phrase core identity, I immediately came across this exquisite map. So yeah, let's take a look at that now. Maybe we can speak to it a little bit and unpack some of your ideas about core identity. So what do we have here on this map?
Well, at the center is this concept of core identity, and that's kind of who you really are. The concept of that came to me kind of from my children. I'm the father of 6 children, ranging now from ages 14 to 28. One of the biggest surprises to me as a father was to find out that every one of my children is absolutely unique. And we have, in our family, we have athletes and couch potatoes and musicians and people that don't sing and all sorts of different characteristics. And how they think and act and talk are different, even though they're all part of the same family. And so that uniqueness is incredible to me. And of course, as individuals, we know that each of us has a unique DNA footprint or signature. And so we can measure to some degree the uniqueness of the individuals. We can change names, and certainly you can change your hair, and your size and weight may change. But the core of who you really are, the concept of that unique individual, is at the heart of everything identity, I believe.
Right. So we've got core identity in the middle, and then it radiates out from there. What are these interesting slices of the pie?
These are things that represent your core identity. One of them, for example, is your name. Each of us have a name, Daza and Mark, but we have other names, like an email address. And there is a name on Facebook or Twitter that may be different, but those are named representations of who you are. Now there are characteristics that we have, height and weight and color of our skin and things like that. There's the roles in which we find ourselves. I like to say that I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I'm a grandfather, and I think about digital identity. Those are different roles in which I find myself. Some of them are personal, some of them are professional. There are locations where we are. Right now, we're in your studio. Earlier today, I was in a hotel in San Francisco giving a speech. Tomorrow, I'll be farther down the peninsula, and then I'll go home to Arizona. So those are locations in which we find ourselves, but they affect or can apply to our individual digital identities. There's the different experiences we have in life, our attributes that apply to our identities. And we, to a certain extent, are a product of our experiences. The experiences I had growing up on a small farm in Idaho are decidedly different than the experiences my children have growing up in a metropolitan area. They affect your point of view and your frame of reference of how you see things. For example, my children can't imagine spending all day on a farm without television. To me, that sounds like heaven. So those experiences shape how we look at things and our perspective on the world. There are what we know, and progressively through our lives, we know more and more about many things. And is that individual knowledge they apply to and affect our identities. And then there are the relationships we have with others. Mm-hmm. I have a different relationship with my wife and my children than I have with you as a professional colleague. But the relationships are important to our identities because in a large measure that shows, by showing the relationship between people, between individuals, makes our identity meaningful and worthwhile. Another aspect is reputation, and that's not what we think of ourselves, but what other people think of us. In some ways, brand us in ways we may not like, or may talk about us in good ways. And so the reputation we have or what other people think about us apply to our individual identities. So those are the major spokes that go out in the identity map from the core identity. Another aspect of that is that there is the physical identity and there's a digital identity. The physical identity may be my height and weight and color of my hair, things that apply physically to me. A digital identity is how you represent that digitally within the computer, on the internet, and so on. A social security number is an example of a digital identity that's applied to an individual. Mm-hmm. It may be changed, but it can be represented within a computer and used for interactions and so on.
Interesting. Well, I have to say, I commend you for taking the initial architectural step of putting together a map, mm-hmm. wherein we can begin to situate what is core and what are the attributes and what kind of categories these different aspects would fit in. And I think it's tremendously useful for it to have a better dialogue across disciplines, across sectors of the economy, between technologists and non-technologists, and so forth, as identity and the emergence of convergence of online and physical identity continues to affect every part of our society. Now, I was wondering if we could focus on one aspect that you were looking at. I was talking recently to Bob Blakley of the Burton Group, who was really emphasizing the role of relationships as an entry point into understanding identity. Mm-hmm. Well, let's roll a clip on that. Here's what Bob had to say.
The real destination is not an identity technology which serves the interests of one party in a multi-party relationship. The real destination is a set of tools that allow all of the parties to build a relationship which is a common asset that adds value to all of their existence. And so we have to get away from essentially what you would think of as a dualistic view of identity. I have mine, and you have yours, and you want to get hold of mine to create an advantage for yourself. That's not the way it works for social creatures. For social creatures, we establish relationships using identity information, and the reason that social organisms succeed is that the relationship actually creates enough value so that two people plus a relationship is much more valuable than just two people alone. So we got to stop thinking about this from the point of view of, of identity being centered in one party or the other and serving the interests of one party or the other at the expense of the other party. And we have to start focusing on it from the point of view of identity information existing in context of and serving as the basis for a mutually beneficial relationship.
Now, I understand you didn't have an opportunity to hear all of Bob's comments, and that was just a small snippet. But what's your take on the role of relationship vis-a-vis identity? And as we go forward into the socially networked, relationship-heavy internet, how does it all play together?